I'm Jim Jordan from the English department at Sacred Heart Cathedral Prep in San Francisco.
And I'm Dan O'Rourke. I'm an English teacher at Riverside Brookfield High School in the western suburbs of Chicago.
And I'm Jennifer Fletcher. I'm an English professor at California State University, Monterey Bay. I teach first-year students and I work with future teachers, and I'm also the chair of the ERWC steering committee.
Okay, our goal today is to compare the two largest high school rhetoric courses in the Western United States, Expository Reading and Writing course designed by the California State University system. And I've got Jennifer Fletcher with me today, who is an expert. As you heard, she's on the steering committee, one of the co-developers of the course. And the other big rhetoric course is AP English Language and Composition. And I've got Dan O'Rourke with me today, who is a contributor to the CED, as is Jennifer. So we are going to compare these two courses today so teachers can take full advantage of prior knowledge and experience they may not even realize they have, just because the two courses are so similar. All right. So the five main sort of umbrella commonalities between the two courses are these. Dan?
Yeah, so let's look at the first two. The first one, rhetorical reading, is we want to teach our kids how to read, not only for the what of the text, simple surface comprehension, but the how and the why. We want them to analyze the text as an objective observer, where they are not part of the audience, but they are actually analyzing that audience along with the choices the writer makes. And in speaking of understanding audience, that second commonality there doesn't only pertain to rhetorical reading, but also rhetorical writing, where we want our kids to analyze the audience that they're writing to and make rhetorical choices that are most effective in moving that particular audience.
Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, so a rhetorical approach is all about understanding how acts of communication take place within specific contexts. And both courses use Kenneth Burke's idea of entering the conversation. So that famous parlor metaphor of you listen for a while, figure out what other people are saying in order to make your own informed contribution. And so what you'll see with ERWC, we move students from reading like a writer into writing like a reader. And this really important idea that scholars don't work in isolation. They're working on the same kinds of questions together, that there's this active dialogue, and that's what we mean by the conversation. Through writing as a process, this is really where students are taking rhetorical action. They're making choices as writers in order to answer ongoing questions at issue. And all of this kind of rhetorical thinking is preparation for communicating across different contexts. So I think that ERWC and AP have in common that they're really focused on post-secondary success and how students are going to be able to adapt their skills to write for new audiences, purposes, and situations, including different disciplinary contexts.
Okay, so let's briefly take a closer look at each of the two courses. The key principles for ERWC, as you can see, one of them is a rhetorical inquiry-based approach. Rhetoric is, of course, the main common thread between the two courses. In AP English Language and Composition, we can see that one of the course objectives is helping students expand their understanding of how written language functions rhetorically. So while the two courses are rhetoric-based, they do have some differences. ERWC, Jennifer, is modular.
Yeah, ERWC, especially in our new third edition, has this kind of DIY design. And so the modules share this base template that moves students from rhetorical reading through rhetorical writing. But teachers, through our professional learning, have the opportunity to design their own cohesive year-long experience for students. We have modules on books, on plays, on issues. We have mini modules that do really deep focused instruction in key rhetorical concepts such as exigence or audience or pathos or kairos. And so through that curriculum where students have multiple opportunities to practice these rhetorical skills, they're learning how to think rhetorically, think metacognitively, and ultimately transfer their learning.
And the AP Lang course, Dan, is divided into units.
Right. And while the AP Lang course can also be taught modularly, or really any way that a teacher feels is most effective. In the CED, we have this course at a glance, which is a 9-unit scope and sequence. And, you know, the units are about 3 weeks apiece. And they just provide, they outline, they articulate the sequence so that the skills that the kids need to learn are covered throughout this 9-week sequence. It's particularly handy because at the end of each 3-week unit, there's a progress check, a personal progress check, which is it's a assessment that is online that the kids can access through a tool called AP Classroom. But anyhow, this is one suggested way of teaching the class.
And each of these units culminates with not just a multiple choice section on AP Classroom, but a written response too, Dan?
That's right. Multiple choice. And then there are, for our course, there are 3 free response questions, 3 essay questions.
So that is a parallel to ERWC there, as when we take a closer look at the assignment template for ERWC, Jennifer, we see this pattern again.
Yeah, so each ERWC module is going to start with high interest texts and topics. It's really important that the curriculum is responsive to student interest. We look for those questions at issue. So what is important and timely right now? And then once we have that rhetorically interesting, kind of culturally relevant text that's going to engage student interest, we build a module using this assignment template. And what you'll notice about the assignment template is that each of those sections outlines the literacy practices of fluent readers and writers. So this represents a transferable process that students can carry with them into their post-secondary lives. These are the learner behaviors that we want students to internalize by the end of the curriculum. That's why they get this kind of extended practice through the modules, that the curriculum, this has this kind of spiraling shape where students are going to keep practicing these skills through increasingly complex texts. And there's also this kind of vanishing assignment template to the course design, where as students start to just do these things on their own, like this becomes how they interact with texts and ideas. We don't have to spend class time with direct instruction in these areas anymore. So students automatically survey the text or do annotation or read with and against the grain. And that doesn't necessarily have to be part of the lesson anymore, because that's something that the student now owns themselves.
And Dan, when we take a closer look at the skills page for AP Lang, we see this pattern of reading to writing emerge here too.
Yes, so that idea of getting away from direct instruction is part of the AP language course as well. These are skills that we're trying to provide practice learning opportunities for students to practice with. You see the course articulation here. The framework is kind of divided into 4 categories, and in each category there are long-term takeaways that we want our students to come away with, and then underneath those long-term takeaways are articulated specific skills. And Jim, as you just mentioned at the beginning, if you look closely at the skill categories, you'll see the first skill category underneath each long-term takeaway or big idea is a reading skill. And then there's a writing skill that is mirrored. If you look at maybe skill 3 and 4, claims and evidence is the big idea. And for the reading skill, we're trying to teach our students or help our students learn to identify and describe the claims and evidence of an argument in a text. And then mirroring that, we want our students to use that knowledge, obviously become better writers, to be able to analyze and select evidence to develop and refine a claim of their own in their own argument.
So both of these courses help students develop skills by practicing rhetorical reading and then applying what they've learned through their close reading skill to their own writing. That's very cool.
Exactly right.
All right, let's take a look at. some effective classroom strategies then this is of course just a partial list. And I can tell you, having taught both classes over the years, that these all work in each of these courses very well. Again, it's a partial list. Let's take a little bit closer. So if you're familiar with these as a teacher, by the way, and you've taught just one of these courses, you could certainly use them in the other as well. Let's take a closer look at some of these. Jennifer?
So in ERWC, we like to say, understand before you argue. Reading rhetorically is an act of inquiry. This is part of preparation for entering the conversation. And this is why it's so important that we're engaging authentic questions at issue. That work to understand first is really essential, so that we're not talking at cross purposes, or we're not kind of addressing an issue that the rest of kind of the community isn't engaged with. And so we do that deep work through strategies like a rhetorical précis. This is a tool that offers not only a summary of what a writer is saying, but also an analysis of what the writer is doing, the writer's purpose, and the writer's audience. We use a lot of descriptive outlining. If you're familiar with the strategy, I have to say this is my go-to technique for deeper reading and for more effective writing. It comes from the work of people like Ken Breffy, and it's that process of charting a text. So of course, a regular outline is going to list content. A descriptive outline lists the content, what the writer is saying, but also analyzes what the writer is doing. So the moves, the effects and rhetorical functions of the moves, really gets into kind of like writer's brain, like what is the writer thinking here? What's the writer trying to accomplish? And what we learn from using these strategies with students in our classes is that just to get to a responsible or effective summary where you feel pretty confident, like, I think this is what other people are saying on this issue, takes a lot of really careful work, and takes a lot of support from teachers in order for students to be well prepared to do that deeper kind of analysis.
I noticed it in the 3.0 version of ERWC. There are a couple of modules now, or mini modules maybe, that deal with Toolman analysis. Dan, this has been one of your go-to strategies for years in AP language too.
Right. So, the précis, the descriptive outline, and Toolman analysis are all super valuable tools in the AP language classroom as well. Toolman is particularly suited to help kids understand logic. If you flash back to where I was talking about our course framework, the bookends are rhetorical situation and style, but the two middle skill categories are logic. It's claims and evidence, and then reasoning and organization. And Toolman helps kids understand logic in a very simple way, with claims and evidence, and being able to identify claims and the types of evidence that support those claims.
And in ERWC, Jennifer, this is a helpful tool as well.
It is. And one of the kinds of extra features in ERWC is that there's real attention to the rhetorical dimensions of the Toolman model of argumentation. So understanding like what your audience already knows and believes, and to what extent they're prepared to accept your claims, that tells a student writer how much of that Toolman model they need to build out in developing their own position.
And then this is one that I like to use in these two classes as well. I like to break every argument down to its two most basic elements, claims and evidence. So this is how I use stasis theory. That was another one of the strategies on the list, and I know it's in both courses. I will have my students parse an argument. Usually it's an op-ed, just to see what they notice about the way authors choose to organize claims and evidence in service of their own arguments, so that my own students can then use these practices in their own writing too. So lots of crossover between the two courses. These three are templates from one of your books, Jennifer, that essentially all speak to occasion.
Yeah, so these are graphic organizers that help students do that deeper work of digging into the particularities of a specific rhetorical situation, and really help to develop kind of the questions that you ask when you're doing that inquiry work in preparation for joining a conversation. So Kairos is all about the right words at the right time, or the opportune moment. in thinking about their purpose. We want to support students in understanding like what they're actually expecting the audience to do differently, or maybe think differently if they're persuaded by their argument. When they look at their audience, we're supporting students in asking questions about what are my audience's cares, concerns, values, interests. So that big question of kind of what matters most for the people for whom this issue most matters. These are capacities that really go beyond just doing academic work to really contributing to effective, civic discourse or interpersonal communication. But students, it goes beyond just the terms, right? It's that deeper work of really thinking carefully about who we are in these different situations that's going to be the biggest takeaway.
And Dan, you and I have talked for years about how we use these in our AP Lang classes too.
It's great, yeah, for the rhetorical situation and rhetorical reading. All three of these are fantastic. And also using them for peer evaluation tools helps our students become more sophisticated writers.
And then if you're looking for more templates, of course, Jennifer's book has them in lots of other areas too. These three concepts are certainly well familiar to anyone who's taught rhetoric. You can't get past chapter 1 without understanding these three. And then for me, this activity here, the believing, doubting, transforming activity, is a great way to help students read effectively and annotate for the synthesis task in AP Lang. And so you can tell us a little bit more about this, maybe, Jennifer.
Sure. So we lean heavily on Peter Elbow's model of methodological doubt and belief, so that the doubting and believing game, or in ERWC, we talk about reading with and reading against the grain. When students are playing the believing game, they're doing things like postponing judgment, trying to understand a text on its own terms. That's part of that whole understand before you argue approach. When they're playing the doubting game, they're resisting the authority of the text, trying to achieve a critical distance. They're examining claims and assumptions. But these are just kind of 2 steps on the process to developing their own position. So kind of beyond reading with and against the grain, students also have all of that synthesis work to do, as Jim mentioned, the understanding multiple perspectives and then situating themselves within an ongoing conversation.
I like to have my students practice this as they're reading multiple sources before they start drafting a synthesis, because it's a great way to, as you say, read with and against the grain, and then record your thoughts as you do so that you can actually synthesize evidence in service of an original argument. It works really well. And that is the way these courses both work. They move from all of these rhetorical reading strategies we've just been discussing to writing. And then here are a partial list, anyway, for ERWC of the culminating tasks for these 2 courses. Jennifer, why don't you tell us a little bit about ERWC's culminating writing tasks?
Sure. So you're seeing that long list of ways to take rhetorical action in ERWC. And this is really the whole point of the curriculum, and that it's intended to prepare students for a variety of different kinds of literacy tasks, including tasks that they may not have encountered before, so that they have opportunities to choose the best available means of persuasion or communication in a given situation.
And then Dan, in an AP Lang course, if you were to go through that 9-unit progression, you would actually write 3 of each of these of varying lengths, but these are the 3 main essay tasks in our course.
That's right. And on the actual AP test, you'll see a synthesis question, a rhetorical analysis question, and an argument question. Just like that first bullet point we see for ERWC, reading-based argument essays. Those are the first 2 bullet points on our own for the AP Lang course. Also, just very quickly, there's 3 multiple choice passages too, where kids are asked to make the most effective writerly choices possible. So again, that would be rhetorical writing as well.
And those are the composition passages, which are sometimes referred to as revision, because it's essentially a multiple choice version of, as you put it, writerly thinking. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so now the real fun part of this for me, the really exciting part, is looking at how these 2 courses prepare students for well, not only for college readiness, but for success in the two major standardized tests in the United States, and then also college courses in almost every discipline. Dan, I know you've run SAT and ACT prep courses for years.
Yeah, well, okay, so the skills that we're trying to help our kids develop in the AP Lang course and ERWC are the same skills that are tested on the writing portions of the SAT and the ACT. The SAT has a rhetorical analysis question. You could look at the prompt there with the language. That's very, very similar to the language you're going to see on the AP language course framework, course at a glance, as well as the free response question number 2. The ACT asks the kids to write an argument of their own, so rhetorical writing. And also, while they're at it, they're supposed to synthesize 3 perspectives you can see in the boxes there. So there's a synthesis aspect and an argument aspect to the ACT writing task.
And ERWC prepares students similarly, Jennifer.
It does. And I think that, what we're going to see next in a moment with a description of a first-year science course at my university is a really good example of why SAT and ACT assess these skills and why AP and ERWC focus on them. The ultimate goal for ERWC is transfer of learning. It's that ability to adapt and apply prior learning in new situations. And rhetorical thinking, again, rhetoric is the common link between ERWC and AP. Rhetorical thinking helps students to be adaptable, flexible, responsive, to go into a new content area, into a new discourse community, figure out what people value, who they are and what they can contribute, and look really closely at how people do their work and how they communicate in various contexts for various purposes. So what you're looking at right now is a course description from an environmental studies course at Cal State Monterey Bay. And you'll notice that not only are students doing things like writing arguments related to environmental topics, but they're also having to make those moves to adapt across a variety of rhetorical situations, even within the same discipline. So, how you write a lab report is different from how you write an abstract, which is different from how you do, say a poster presentation at a conference on undergraduate research. And so I'm really excited about the way both ERWC and AP look beyond just the high school courses or just the tests to really what's going to matter to students' future success in all kinds of situations that that are going to be new for them and that they're going to have to figure out on their own, and that we hope they can do that with real skill and confidence.
Yeah, this is exciting. I often say that both of these courses are almost miscast as English courses because they really are by design set up to help students recognize how to transfer their learning to other disciplines and civic responsibility in life after school as well. And when students can see this, that really excites them. It's another road to engagement for me. So this is really cool. And of course, speaking of really cool and helping engage your students, if you don't have these 2 books, as long as we've got Jennifer here, we might as well thank her for giving them to us. Dan and I have used these in our courses for years. They are
lean on these heavily. Yes.
They are for my money, they are the 2 best playbooks for teaching a rhetoric course. And the second one, teaching literature rhetorically, I use in my fiction-based courses as well. It's very similar. The rhetorical approach to reading text and interacting with text. So I highly recommend these 2 books. Thank you, Jennifer, for being with us. We've got the website for Stenhouse on the next slide, but really nice to have this conversation with both of you today. Very exciting stuff. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Jim.
And Jennifer, especially thank you to you. There's the Stenhouse slide. And Jennifer, if teachers are interested, teachers who may have had experience with the 2.0 version of ERWC or may not have been trained in it yet, they can go to this website.
Yeah, so California teachers can register for either an update session or a certification session for ERWC. If you've never been through the full introductory workshop series, you'll want to start with that. But the curriculum and the professional learning are available at no cost to teachers. And we'd be delighted to have you join the ERWC network. We are a multi-state literacy network. And since our inception back in around 2004, over 15,000 educators have been participants in ERWC professional learning.
All right, Dan and Jennifer, I want to thank you both very much for joining me today. That was terrific. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thank you all for joining us.